Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Jake, this is Nadia, this is Buddy, that's Sedona, Babu is running around downstairs. And today we are talking about the new Mad Max film, Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. I'm no huge Mad Max fan. I saw Mad Max Fury Road when it came out in theaters. That was almost 10 years ago now, I think. And I enjoyed it. I wasn't crazy about it, as a lot of people were. And I haven't really seen it since, but I was really curious to see how Furiosa held up. I mean, super hotly anticipated. I mean, the way people talk about Mad Max Fury Road, they talk about it like it's the second coming of Christ, you know, which it is a great movie. But you haven't seen any of the Mad Max films.
No, this is the first one, and I like that it was a prequel because I didn't feel lost at all when I watched the film. I thought it was very well done. Going to the review, I thought I would rate it 9 out of 10.
Really?
I was very engaged.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was very engaged. I thought Anya Taylor-Joy did a phenomenal job as Furiosa. It's just interesting because, you know, there's the younger Furiosa versions, and all of them, it's like, it's so amazing the resemblance that they have with Anya Taylor-Joy. It felt like very seamless. The characters felt very much in sync. Sometimes you watch movies that have like character arcs that are dispersed through different like age brackets, you know, with time jumps, and then you feel like, okay, this character is completely different than this character, you know, and it seems like something's lacked there. And it seemed the continuity was just flawless, the way it progressed, the character development. And honestly, I really want to watch the other films now, preceding or before this one, but technically, I guess if we're going to follow the timeline, it would be preceding this timeline.
Yeah, you should definitely see Fury Road, because it basically, Furiosa goes right into Fury Road.
Yeah, and I want to, and it's just, it's so interesting. You know, there were some times at the end where I was like, okay, is this the end? Is this the end? There was like a lot of different points where it could have been the ending, and it was kind of like, you know, there's a narrator at the very end, so it's kind of like the telling of how you would think like a telling of a Bible movie or something like that, you know? So I understand why it was like that, but I think that was like my little thing where I just felt like it was gonna end like twice, but it didn't because it kind of kept going. But you know, looking back at it, it made sense. I don't want to get too much into spoilers, but there is a little, not as much verbal dialogue, obviously, with the main character for XYZ reason. And I thought the facial movement, the expression from both the older Furiosa, played by Anya Taylor-Joy, and the younger versions of herself, was really well done. You could really tell like the inner monologue and everything else that the character was thinking. Didn't recognize Chris Hemsworth very much. I mean, his face, like they changed his face a little bit, and then
he was really funny.
He was really funny. It was kind of like, I don't know, maybe this is my own bias, but it kind of felt like Thor went bad. What if Thor went bad, you know? And if you've seen like the Loki saga, how there's like different timeline. What if Thor was like taken out of his home really young, rendered his power useless, and then grew up in like the dunes, you know? And I also really loved the music. I loved the scenes. It's interesting, like, how it's done, because you could feel like it's futuristic, but at the same time, it's very much, you know, when you see the roads, the trucks, the motorcycles and everything, it's like this dystopian world. But I like that it didn't have too much of a jump, too much of like, it was not too much removed from technology from today's day, because it made it very interesting and made it kind of more survivalistic. And you could also empathize with like even the antagonists in the film in certain ways, because it makes you kind of think like, okay, what if like you have all these different types of cruelty done to you? I mean, not condoning any of their actions because it was horrid, but what would you be, you know? And kind of like Furiosa had her background that kept her intact. So it was really interesting. I really liked it. What did you think?
I'm a little mixed on it.
Okay. What would you rate it?
I'm not totally sure. I'll get to it.
Okay.
It's interesting seeing your perspective as someone who's had no exposure to the Mad Max series. I've seen Fury Road, and those are kind of like my expectations. And admittedly, those are very high expectations. And I think most people going into this movie are going to have very high expectations because Fury Road was such a critical darling and it's so beloved. In this movie, it just is not as good as Fury Road. And so maybe the fact that you haven't seen Fury Road, this is your first exposure to George Miller directing action, and it's super cool. And there are some great action sequences in this movie, but it doesn't have the kind of kinetic excitement of Fury Road, and it's also a very different type of movie. I mean, Fury Road takes place, and so many reviewers have talked about this, over the course of like 3 days, whereas Furiosa is like 20 years or something, or a long time, and it's very episodic. There's like these chapter titles, and there's a lot of fading in and out, and you're kind of just following this character's story, and there's not as much tension or dramatic tension or narrative tension. It's just kind of like episodic moments, and the movie changes a lot throughout. You're kind of going, okay, what is the movie now? What is the movie now? What is it going towards? What's the thread of the story and the character? I've got to say, like, I was frustrated through a lot of this movie, trying to figure out where it was going, and it was too long. Like, I really felt that this movie's about 2.5 hours, and I felt like there was a lot that could have been trimmed. It's an epic, and it's kind of doing something different from Mad Max Fury Road, and that's kind of unfair to compare them, because one is like a super tight thrill ride, and this one is trying to be some kind of like mythological epic, and I just feel like the story wasn't written successfully that way. They wanted to do that, but the structure of the film just wasn't well done. This happens, and then this happens. I just got a sense of, like you said, like, when is the movie going to end? There were multiple times where I'm like, is this the end? Are we ending now? And then when the movie did end, I was just like, okay, like, it just felt a little jarring. And I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that it's a prequel. Again, you're kind of watching this as the first movie. It's a different experience.
I feel like I'm watching it now, watching it as the first film in the saga. Any movie I watch after that for Mad Max series will be like actually following the timeline in a more linear fashion.
Yeah, and that's interesting. But for me, I'm watching it going, okay, so this is... she has to do this. How is she going to lose her arm? It falls into a lot of the traps that prequels fall into. Unfortunately, and I hate to be this person, but visually it's just not as good as Mad Max Fury Road. It feels way more digital, and a lot of the effects, a lot of the action feels just more fake and looks more fake, unfortunately, than Mad Max Fury Road, which was a masterpiece of like intense practical and CG blending, but it's very seamless and very well done. This movie, you can kind of feel like, okay, this part's shot on a set. This looks kind of fake. And there are some like just bad shots in the movie that look really wonky. And there were times when I'm going, did they finish the CGI in this scene? There were a few moments like that. So it doesn't have the kind of seamlessness. It doesn't have the kind of like gritty feel of Mad Max Fury Road, which I was missing. However, it has very well choreographed action. The scenes are great. There's one particular sequence where they're going on this big rig, and Anya Taylor-Joy is with this, I think his name is Praetorian Jack, and they kind of have this relationship, and he's looking after her, and they're looking after each other, and they're being attacked by these paragliders, and it's very good. And there's great sequences like that, and some thrilling sequences. But then after that's over, you're going, all right, now what? Where is this movie heading? And one of my biggest issues and complaints is that I feel like Furiosa was just a very stagnant character. And this movie is supposedly about her growth and change as a character, and I just didn't really see that change. You know, if this movie's about her learning to, like, that revenge isn't an answer, I don't think it pulled it off very well. I wasn't very satisfied by the revenge narrative. If it's trying to show us, like, some kind of character change, I didn't really see that either, because at the beginning of the film, we're following her as a little girl, and she's already super feisty and gritty and tough, thwarting the bad guys at every step, like a tough, smart kid. So it felt like she was just that kind of, like, tough badass from the very beginning of the movie until the end. There's some wonderful stuff in it, but it fell a little flat for me, and I was hoping for a bit more.
I mean, a lot of what you're saying I can't really like rebuttal, because I haven't seen, you know, the other films, so I just have to take your word for it, I guess. It does make me excited to watch the other film, and
we should watch it tonight.
We could, yeah. And it's just, I mean, honestly, your review kind of makes me more excited. If this is the first one you've seen, or you haven't seen the other ones, just watch this one, and according to Jake, the next one just gets better.
I'd give it like a 7 out of 10.
This one, okay. What would you give the other one?
Again, I saw it when it came out, so it's been a while.
But you clearly
From what I remember, it's like a 9 out of 10, you know.
Wow,
It's
okay.
it's a very strong movie.
Okay.
But it's also it's way more straightforward. I feel like it was more emotional too. Like this movie was trying to have this like epic emotional feel. It didn't reach what I felt during Fury Road, which was way more simple, which had way less baggage. I mean, this movie almost was approaching, I was starting to feel like Chris Hemsworth's movie, who plays the character Dementis, who's the villain. A lot of time is spent with him, and I almost started feeling more invested in his character and what he,
I didn't feel that way at all.
I mean, I was just going like, well, this is interesting. There's like a lot of politics in the movie in a sense. Like it's kind of weird because in like Fury Road, there's like this world building, but it's kind of like peripheral. It's not really the main point. But here, there's like a lot of like, we have different groups. You have Gas Town, you have Bullet Town, you have like just like kind of the different rivalries and stuff. And it's just a totally different experience. And you kind of gotta go in expecting more of like a slower epic. And it's not even that it's super slow. It's just not paced right. There's something missing in the way that the story moves.
Again, not having watched the other films, I disagree with a lot of it. I mean, like, I felt like it was emotional. Again, not watching the other films. It's emotional in the way that survival, like, where you have no choice but to survive. It's emotional in that way, where you don't really have time to cry when you're busy dodging bullets. And, like, you know, it's very much that tale where you're backed up into the wall and you have no other way, nothing else you can do but to be strong, right? You can either give in or you can give out and know that you're gonna die. And so it felt emotional to me in that sense. I don't really expect the main characters to, like Furiosa, to have something that was more emotional. She's very strong and also guarded because she had to be, and I thought that was very well portrayed, you know, through the character's arc. And so yeah, I disagree with you there.
Well, do you want to get into spoilers?
Yes. 3, 2, 1.
Spoilers.
So it's interesting because obviously I didn't know that she loses her arm, Furiosa.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was going to be the end. That was the first ending that I thought,
okay.
you know, is, okay, she's chained in, she'll do something, and actually she'll kick like Chris Hemsworth's ass instead. And then she rips her arm off, leaves or survives, and then she has a robotic arm at the end. And that was news to me because I don't know the story. I was like, okay, cool. The other time when I felt like it was a fake ending was when she took a shot at Chris Hemsworth. I thought, like, you know, her and her father figure and / love interest, that was kind of confusing to me. I was like, is he supposed to be the love interest or is he supposed to be like a father or big brother figure to her? I didn't really know. I think it was supposed to be a love interest because there was a scene where he was like, you know, tending her wound and then her arms, like her sleeves were completely down and they were just going like this. So I'm like, okay, maybe it's a love interest. So I was a little confused about that relationship, how it went. But when she rescues him, even though she's free to go off and go to her homeland, you know, like she's wanted to. And I thought she was going to go back and she was going to like kill, you know, Chris Hemsworth's character. And then that was going to be the end. Well, that leads to them eventually getting captured, her losing her arm, and then another area where, so that's like the 3 areas, right? Where she goes to rescue her boyfriend, ? And her, then, you know, when they get captured was the fake ending number 2 for me. And then the third time was the actual ending. But then that even like went a little bit further along than it did because it's like, how did Chris Hemsworth's character die? Well, he could have died like this, and this, but actually what happened was they used his body to grow a seed. Kind of came full circle for me because her mother gave her that seed, saying plant this seed, and then instead of going back to her homeland, she wanted to nurture other civilization, you know, in this world that she lives in. And I thought that was kind of beautiful because she could go back and then she herself would be safe. Well, but it's nice that she wants to nurture other people because you do see this power struggle of like, it's almost like similar to our reality in a lot of ways where the rich is, you know, few but control the majority, and then a lot of people are barely struggling or barely surviving. And it felt like she was kind of like tending to them and their needs a lot more.
My problem with the ending is that it felt like to get an actual satisfying conclusion, you need to watch Fury Road right after. And it even, right when it cuts to the ending, during the credits they show clips from Fury Road, and it's kind of
I was confused about what that was happening, and then you said that's
from Fury Road, and it was kind of weird to me because it was like once they started showing those clips, I was going like, oh yeah, I'm reminded of a better movie that I'd rather be watching, and it looks better too. Like the effects, like it just like it's hard to deny. Like when it cuts to those scenes, it's like, man, I really want to watch Fury Road to like finish the story because I didn't feel satisfied. And I think part of the problem is like the movie is set up in so much of what she wants to do as a character is to return to her home, to the green place, to the place of abundance where she came from. She has the map on her arm, and like the whole movie's directing like she needs to return. Like that's the thrust of the movie. And then it just kind of doesn't. She first off, she can't go back because because Fury Road happens, and you haven't seen Fury Road, but that's an important element of that movie. So she can't go back at the end, and I knew that watching the movie. I'm like, where is this going? Because I know she can't return until Fury Road. So it's like, okay, if you can't do that in this movie, there's also the revenge story of her trying to hunt down Chris Hemsworth's character, but that should have been more foregrounded. It felt almost like the script and the writers were really more interested in fleshing out the world building of Fury Road in Furiosa. And there's a lot of sidetracks that go into, Immortan Joe and his reign and the different empires he rules and who's in control of it. And, Chris Hemsworth is trying to carve out his own place in that empire. And there's power struggles. It felt like they were more interested in that. Whereas I, as a viewer, the emotional arc I was going through and what we had been hooked on was the story of Furiosa being captured. I was like, if we just focused on this revenge story and this world building was more on the periphery, I feel like it would have been a more straightforward, more successful narrative, and I would have been more emotionally invested because it just kind of kept going in and out, and it felt like we forgot Furiosa's story and we're going into this like world building stuff that was like, it's interesting, but it also just didn't cohere to the whole structure of the movie, I thought.
I don't feel that way, obviously. And that, like I said, it's hard for me to argue with you when I haven't seen the movie that you're talking about. But yeah, I didn't feel that way. I mean, if you look at it, it's kind of like the way that it's filmed, directed is like if you watch a history movie, because there's different chapters of what happened, but then like making that more fantasy related, And so I compared it earlier in the non-spoiler section to the Bible, because it's kind of like this led to this and this led to this, and then the Genesis, and then eventually Revolution will happen, like kind of thing.
An epic, trying to do like an epic tale.
Yeah, and then when you look at it that way, it works, And again, I can't really speak on what you're saying because I haven't watched the other ones. So.
Well, I'm going to say something that might make people mad.
Uh-oh.
But the vibe I got, and I'm saying I like this movie, but the vibe I got was very much the Hobbit trilogy.
No freaking way. Okay. I have watched the Hobbit trilogy like many times, and not because like...
Can I explain? All right, I'm not saying they're similar in tone and style or whatever, but in terms of what was happening, we have a successful classic, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Mad Max Fury Road, very successful and beloved, a lot of practical effects and blending digital effects, but like Marvel's like once in a million years cinematic successes that will be remembered forever. And then we have the original creators going back to create prequels to those movies. And maybe because making movies like that is incredibly difficult and doing practical stuff is incredibly hard, there's now in these prequels a lot more digital stuff and a ton of added world building that kind of bloats up the movie. So I'm saying it's kind of like it's a very different thing, but I think there's a bit of like a similar parallel between going from like these classics and then something that's like a little diluted, a little watered down, a little more CGI heavy, a little more bloated, and a lot more world building that doesn't necessarily add to the story or the emotional weight of the movies.
No. I watched the Hobbit films many times, not because I was a big fan, but because I kept falling asleep and losing and kept having to rewatch because it was so boring for me because it was stretched out longer than it should have. And the big reason why I disagree is because Hobbit is extended to 3 films when it could have been 1 film.
No, I get that. I'm just saying there's like slight similar parallels.
In the slightest way that is not even comparable.
I'm not saying that Furiosa is the same as watching all 3 Hobbit movies. I'm just saying that the downgrade is slightly similar.
Agree to disagree.
All right. Let us know what you thought. If you liked it, let us know why. If you didn't, let us know why and what else we should watch. And I hope you have a good day.
Yeah, thanks for watching.
Bye.
Bye.